started. Thank you all so much for dialing in today. I'm really excited to dive into this office hours, both to learn all about how to strategically hire and build your team, and also because a core goal of Dreamers and Doers is to amplify you and your journeys. And one of the ways we achieve this is by facilitating game-changing educational events such as this one that give us all the opportunity to up-level together. So before we officially begin, I want to share a bit of background information on our esteemed expert. Kimone is the founder of Hire Breakthrough, and through her work, she coaches founders and organizations on how to build strong teams using an intentional hiring approach. Throughout her career, she has worked in places where candidates were underrepresented and founders were misinformed. She believes that when you focus on the power of people over profits, you deliver a better experience for both you, the business, and the candidates. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Kimone. We are so excited to learn from your expertise today. We know how valuable your time is, and we're so grateful to you for investing in the collective in this way.
Yes, thank you so much for the warm introduction, Hannah. I really appreciate it. Hi, everyone. First and foremost, thank you for being here. I am so excited to dive into this topic because I always get questions about building team, since that's a particular expertise from me. So I won't waste any time. I'll just go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so today's presentation, of course, I'm going to talk about red flags for you to avoid during the process. So your recruitment process, I'll talk about how you actually create a recruitment strategy, the steps to execute that strategy. And then of course, we will have time at the end for Q&A because I'm sure you guys will have some questions. So let's go ahead and dive in. Before we get started, I'll just briefly go over myself and how I came to start doing this work. So I'm hiring a recruitment strategist. I have over 10 years of experience in the field, and educationally, I studied engineering and HR. So I actually went to engineering school and I studied human resource analytics, which yes, is actually a field, which we study the people and the data behind a lot of the decisions that we make. So I use that with a recruitment process, and that is how I founded my company, Hire Breakthrough. And of course, I've worked as a COO, Chief Operations Officer, and a Chief of Staff. So I have a breadth of experience. And of course, I use all my experience when working in recruitment. So let's just go ahead and dive in because we're going to start off by talking about some of the red flags that you need to be aware of in your recruitment process, your recruitment strategy. Okay, so the first thing is if you find that you are turning down any opportunities in your business, that is an immediate red flag when it comes to your recruitment processes, when it comes to your team. Because I know often we'll say things as founders like, man, I wish I could just get like 100 customers, or 100 clients, depending on the type of business that you have. But you have to ask yourself if you have the actual infrastructure to actually support that level of growth. Because yes, you have the goals, but you do need to have the people, the systems, and everything behind that to really make sure that you're able to do that. So if you were able to get that amount of eyes on your business, that amount of customers, would you be able to actually take that opportunity? The second thing is that you can't take a break or a vacation. And this is particularly for the founders, right? The founders, the co-founders, and so forth, because if you're finding yourself, you're not able to necessarily step away from your business without kind of things hitting the fan, then that is a red flag because of course your actual work-life balance has to come into play with your full strategy when it comes to recruitment. So that's another thing for you to consider. If you're starting a new revenue stream, so of course a lot of us were visionaries. So if you have a bright new idea and you're like, okay, I'm going to add this revenue stream, maybe in Q4 or Q1, you have to think about who is it that I need in order to actually execute this revenue stream, because of course you need to have a plan and a process in place for every stream of revenue that you have. And that's for if you're a product or a service-based type of company. The fourth thing is that if your customers are complaining, now this is a big one because of course, if you're getting feedback from the people who you're serving in your business that, they're upset with maybe the services, or they're not necessarily getting what it is that they thought they were getting, and they're complaining about level of service, maybe the response times and so forth, that's a red flag, because word can spread very easily for any type of company, depending, it doesn't matter if they're early stage growth phase or anything like that. So you want to make sure that if customers are necessarily complaining about the level of service, that you actually have a plan in place to actually really address that. So that's a red flag for you to be aware of. Now, of course, if you do have team already, if your team is overwhelmed, that is also a red flag, because what you don't want to happen, you don't want your team members to be burnt out. And if they get burnt out, they could start looking for other opportunities. I know at the time of this recording, quiet quitting is a very huge thing when it comes to talent. And if they are overwhelmed and they need additional support, you don't want to necessarily ignore that. You want to have a plan in place to actually address that, because you want everybody to be working in the optimal experience. So those are just some red flags. I'll continue to give you a couple of more for you to be aware of. So then the next one is if your revenue and your sales are stagnant. This is a big one. So if you're noticing every year or over the past year that the revenue and sales that you have in your business aren't really moving, that it's just in the same place, maybe it's even dropped, you have to ask yourself, what's the reason behind it? Now, of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's recruitment, but usually 9 times out of 10, that does factor into play. Like maybe you're understaffed, you don't have enough staff. And that moves to the second one, where you might need somebody with a specific skill set. Maybe it's been taking you so long to find the person that you need in order for you to make more money, to have more sales in your business. And if you're finding that that is the issue, it's something that you definitely want to address rather sooner than later. The next one is that you have no organizational strategy. This is a huge one, because particularly for the types of founders who are seeking funding, so maybe you're trying to get your Series A or you're trying to get more funding into your business, one of the biggest things that your investors are going to look at is your organizational strategy. So they want to know the plan in place that you have for actually executing the product or the service that you want them to invest in. And part of that is actually having people. So you want to make sure that you're actually thinking about the talent that you need and being intentional around that, because money is going to be allocated towards your team, and you want to make sure that it's the right amount of money. So you don't want to definitely, undersell like, oh, I just need 2 people, when in fact, you really need like 10 people. So think about your organizational strategy. Next one is that there's enough work for another full-time job. Often, if you're like a founder or your co-founders, you're doing maybe like 3-4 jobs in the startup. And of course, at the start of it, that might be all right. But as you're trying to scale, you're trying to, get funding and things like of that nature, that if you're having so much work that it's another job, are you really able to do things to the optimal place that you really need to, so your revenue and sales are going to skyrocket? So that's another one. And the last one is that you aren't attracting the right candidates. So this one is a big one, because of course, if you need that skill set in order for you to really hit those numbers, in order to really make the impact that you want to make, if you're not attracting the right people to your job, that's a red flag, because it could be a variety of things. It could be the process. It could be your job description. It just could be so many different things, but it's a red flag. And you definitely want to address that sooner rather than later, because you're going to waste a lot of resources like time, energy, money, and we don't want to do that. So those are some of the red flags that I want you to keep in mind when it comes to your overall recruitment process. Okay, so I wanted to just address this question because I get this question often. Like I get this all the time. It's like, when is the right time to hire somebody? Or, when is the right time to start building out that team? And the real answers to this question is that you really want to do it before the growth. You really want to do it before growth phase, because you definitely will need the team in place in order for you to even get to the growth phase. And it's going to be easier for you. And by no means, I'm not saying that it has to necessarily be full-time help. It could be part-time help. It could be contractors. It could just look a variety of different ways depending on your business. But you do want to have some people in place before you hit this phase, because it's going to make things easier for you when you're talking to investors and the whole 9 yards. So you have two options that you could really focus on. You and your co-founder, you guys could do everything yourself. You can get very burnt out. You can get overwhelmed. You can get really, really exhausted. And this is not what we want to do, because it's going to take you away from some of the visionary things that you want to do. You want to naturally create things, ideas, and just have, the bandwidth to really focus on the revenue generating activities. The second thing is that you could hire the help you need to help you focus. Right? That's the key word, focus on what it is that you need to be doing. So depending on your background, some founders are naturally marketers. Some founders are naturally, good at sales. And maybe you have a co-founder who is able to take some of the things that you're not necessarily good at off of your plate. Regardless, you want to make sure both of you are like working in your optimal seats, and then hire the people you need to help you focus on what you truly need to focus on. Okay, so those are the two options for you that I want you to really consider anytime you're thinking about bringing on additional team members. Now, let's talk about creating your recruitment strategy and what that entails. Okay, so the first one is clarifying. You got to clarify the position. Now, a couple of things fall into place with this step. So of course, that's your organizational strategy. What does your company needs to look like for every phase? So what does it need to look like now? What does it need to look like a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? That's one of the things you really want to think of before you even start hiring or recruiting, because it's going to make things easier. You're going to have a plan into place as to who you need to hire at certain points. And just a tip, investors definitely want to see that. So you want to have that first and foremost. You also need to clarify the actual positions. So what's the job title of the position? Like realistically, you want to get as close to it as possible, because often what I see is that you might have a job title for position, but when you're reading the responsibilities, it's just all over the place. So you want to make sure that it's optimal. So if you're saying, for example, if you say something like, okay, I'm going to hire a chief of staff. And then when you're looking at the duties, the chief of staff is really talking about things like marketing and things like that. That's not really on par. So you want to make sure the responsibilities of the job and the title are in alignment. Then, of course, with the job description and the responsibilities, you want to make sure that you are being as realistic as possible. Nothing is worse than you are asking for a whole bunch of things in the actual job description, but in the actual job, it is like a 365 in terms of what you need this person to do. Candidates are looking at your job description to kind of get a feel of your company, one, but a feel of the actual job itself. And if it's not on par, that is going to really make the recruitment process really hard for you, especially in the early stages. So you need to clarify all of that. Get clear on the amount of time you need, particularly if you're hiring part-time staff members or if you're hiring contractors. You want to definitely get a good estimate of time. And that means that if you're doing it right now yourself, how much time is it taking you? Same thing if you have another team member doing their job, and this one that you're trying to hire for, how much time is it going to take them as well to do the responsibility in the job, and allocate that amount of time, because you want to be realistic with your expectations. And then the other thing that I would really mention in, clarifying all of this is you have to think about your recruitment process and your strategy the same way you think about your marketing process or your marketing campaign. It's like a campaign, and you want to make sure that you're planning each process efficiently and you have the things you need in each step in order to really execute that. We'll talk about execution a little bit later on, but this is what the clarify phase should really, really look like. The second thing is attract. Now, I know this is a big one for a lot of people. So it's like, how are you going to attract the right people? So when I had said earlier that your recruitment process is like a marketing campaign, it is like that. So it's the same way you're thinking about, okay, how am I going to attract my ideal customers, my ideal client avatar? How are you going to attract the ideal candidates to your position? And that can include a bunch of things. So of course, the job description, one, it's a marketing tool. It's designed for you to pull in the right person for the job. So what you really want your job descriptions to do is turn off the people that you don't want to apply for the job, and for the people that you really want, it's going to pull them in and attract them. Your branding also comes into play here, because if you are talking about in your job description of like the type of culture that you have, is your brand actually on par with what it is that you're sharing? Because candidates are doing research on you the same way you're doing research on them. And, I always say they can call, BS on some of the things that I've seen people put on their job description in comparison to their company. So they are doing research. You also want to make sure that you are searching for talent in a variety of different places. We are having, of course, a war with talent at the time of this recording. So necessarily just posting on a job site is just simply not enough, because even if you're early stage right now, you are competing for the same talent with these big corporations. So like Google, Amazon, you're competing for the same talent. So why would somebody want to work with your startup versus working with one of these big organizations? You have to think about it strategically from that point of view in order for you to really pull the person in. And you can also do that by the type of benefits you offer. Like, what does your benefits package look like? Why is somebody going to really want to work there? You have to put yourself almost in the position of the person you want to attract to see what they really want to get out of the experience. So of course, compensation. Do you have remote capabilities? That's a big one right now, remote capabilities for the type of position. Of course, the benefits package, like I had said before, what does your culture look like? These are some of the ways that you're going to really use to attract candidates. Now, of course, you have to put manpower also behind how you're going to attract them, because like I said before, the job posting is not enough. You actually need humans behind the system. So of course you can post as well, but you need somebody, and it could just be you behind that, to really get the type of people that you want to apply to the position. So that's the second one, that's attract. The third one is you're going to simplify. So once you are starting to attract the right candidates to the position, the next thing is that, okay, let's say if you have 100 applications, how are you going to make the best decision when it comes to who you should move forward in your process? So this is going to look like how you are going to screen, the applications. And of course, if you're screening like, hundreds and hundreds of applications, that could be very hard. So with that, of course, you want to have systems here to support you. But what you also need is you need a structure in how you're going to actually screen them out. And you want to do it in an unbiased type of way, because it's going to help you make the right informed decision. So think about things like, of course, the screening. Are you going to have somebody come in person for an interview? Are you doing phone interviews? Are you doing video interviews? What does that process look like? And what are the right questions that you need to be asking for you to have the information that you need to see if this person is right for the position or not? That's how you're going to simplify all of this. And of course, you're going to have your systems in place to actually help you make an informed decision at this point. So that's how you're going to simplify the entire process. The next part is analyzing. So you have information now, you have their application, you have their resume, you've screened them, you've had phone interviews, the whole 9 yards. So now it's like, okay, I have all this information. How am I analyzing this information to know, okay, this is the person that I think is actually right for the position? And with that being said, you need to have a rubric. How are you going to actually score this? For those of you who have maybe some team members on your, in your startup, in your company right now, they can actually really help you in this process. So if you, want to make a really unbiased, decision with the position, involve your team members in the process. That's a great way for you to actually get their feedback, because they're also going to be working with this person. So that's something that you want to definitely consider at this point. It's almost like you're thinking of it like a scorecard. Like, how are you going to score each candidate? And sometimes what people can do at this point, depending on the type of position it is they can have somewhat of a group interview where this person can meet with members of the team, so they can actually get a feel of the working environment as the candidate, but also the team members can actually get a feel for this person too. So that's another way for you to actually analyze that part, so you can make an informed decision and say, yes, this is the person that I want to hire. The next part is you want to engage. So when I say engage, it includes onboarding. So like you've picked your person, you're like, yes, this is a person, you've given them the offer and they sign on the dotted line. And it's like, what comes next? Now, this is the part where I see a lot of people get tripped up on, because just after you hire the person, it's not done. The recruitment process and strategies really past actually having them sign. So you're moving more into onboarding. So you have to think about, what does your onboarding process really look like? Do you have processes in place to help this person once they're starting out? Is there somebody on their team that they can work with or ask questions about, any questions they might have pertinent to the role? And you want to think to yourself and ask yourself, what is it that this person needs to be successful in this role? Because communication is going to be a huge piece here. So if this person is actually reporting to you right now, you have to think about how you're communicating with this person. A big mistake I see a lot of people make is that they hire the person and then they're like, okay, hit the ground running, impress me, but there's no actual process in place in order for them to impress you. So what are their key performance indicators? When are you going to be checking in with this person? Like I said, how does communication look like during this process? And is there going to be 360-degree feedback? So you can give them feedback about how they're doing in the role, and they can give you feedback as well. Communication is a big part with this stage, because that's usually where there's some type of breakdown in the process, is with communication. Because what you want to do is you want to definitely hire the right person, but you also want to retain them. Retention is a huge part when it comes to this. So those are the 5 stages that you really need to think about from start to finish when it comes to your recruitment process. Now let's talk about executing this. Like, let's be realistic, and I'll talk to you about some of the things that you'll need with this process. So of course, if you're saying to yourself, okay, I need this recruitment process, we talked about the steps, the stages of that process. Now you have to make sure you're allocating a minimum of 42 days. And this is for like the easiest role possible. And it's also for somebody who has some type of experience when it comes to recruitment. So if you have somebody on your team to help you with that, then this is the minimum amount of time that it will take. This is the amount it would take in terms of hours. So I wanted to give you both numbers, so you just have that idea when it comes to your recruitment process. Now, if you're hiring for a position or recruiting for a position that is more technical, higher level position, you want to at least triple the time frame. So that's why I always say it's better for you to start this process before it's actually needed, because you want to have as much time as possible to really invest in this and make it an intentional process. Because if you're hiring from a place of overwhelm, like I just need this person, that's where you tend to make a lot of mistakes, particularly if you don't have the recruitment background, or this is just not your thing when it comes to bringing on a next team member. Okay, so let's talk about some of the stuff that you need. So of course, you need a skilled person to manage the process. So if you or your co-founder or somebody on your team has the skill set to actually do the recruitment process, I'm all for it. You should actually talk to them to see if they can actually manage this process from start to finish, because it'll help you get results, of course, in a quicker time frame. It'll just be easier as well. The second thing is you need the tools. So think about, okay, how am I going to conduct interviews? How am I going to communicate with candidates as well? That's a big thing. And I mean communication in terms of who was moved to the next stage, who was not, and all of that, your applications. So you have to think about all the stuff that you're going to need to manage this process from start to finish and make it a repeatable process that you can use every time you're hiring somebody. The third thing is that you need a hiring budget. So this is also a big mistake I see. You need some type of budget around your hiring. It doesn't matter, if it's big or small, but you need something. And you want to use your hiring budget for, of course, job boards. You want to use it for a recruiter, because if you can afford it and you want somebody specialized to help you, it's going to help you accelerate faster. So that's where you can work with somebody like me or another recruiter to help you in that process. The tools that you use for this process also would factor into your hiring budget as well. So just another thing for you to consider. The next one is, of course, automations. You want to use technology to help you in this process, but you need to have a human behind the technology. So I see a lot of, startups, they have the technology, but they don't have the people behind it to actually manage the process from start to finish. And the last thing you're going to need is time. You're going to need as much time as possible for you to make an informed decision. When we're rushing, that's when we tend to make a lot of mistakes. So if like next year, you definitely need to hire, maybe an engineer, maybe you need to hire like a chief of staff or something. Think about the time frame that you want this process to start and want this process to finish, because you can start planning for it from now. So those are some of the things that you would need in order to really execute on the process. And I just wanted to give you a statistic. So according to SHRM, that's the Society of Human Resources Management, every time you have to rehire, it costs you $7,000 to $10,000. And this is why retention is such a huge thing when it comes to any type of company, whether it's big or small. And the $7,000 to $10,000, it really comes in time, energy, and money. Your time is money. So I want you to really think about that, because I think sometimes founders, they'll say, well, I'll just do it myself. Remember, you're investing time in this process, and it is taking you away from doing some of the other things. So you got to think about your time as being valuable in terms of dollars and cents. It's also energy. It might be a drain suck for a lot of people. I, of course, love recruitment, so I'm very biased when it comes to this. But of course, if it's not your jam, it's a lot of energy to put in the process, especially if it's just for one person. And of course, money. We don't want to necessarily have to lose money when we don't need to. So think about that. If you have intentionality behind your recruitment process, it'll make it easier for you to actually retain the type of person that you want, and not have to rehire for the position at all. Okay, so what I wanted to say is that with your recruitment process, for you to really make it as successful as you want it to be, you have to have a plan in place. Your plan, which is your recruitment process, is going to lead to the profit. So think about this question: what is the return on investment that you want for every position that you're hiring for? The OKRs, the key performance indicators, that is how you're going to actually get the return on investment that you're seeking for every position that you're hiring for. So in order for you to get to the profit, you have to have the plan in place, which is your recruitment process. So you need a strategy. I just went over how you would create that strategy and some of the things that you would need in order to actually have the strategy. And the next thing you're going to need is a proven, repeatable system, because what you don't want to have to do is constantly reevaluate the wheel, reinvent the wheel over and over and over again. So you want to have a system that you can use again and again every time that you need to hire for somebody, whether you're in the early stage right now or you're in the growth stage. Just some things for you to consider. So now we're nearing to the end of this. So there's two things that I wanted to share with all of you. So depending on where you're at, the first thing is our free quiz. So if you're in the position right now where you're like, okay, I know I need to hire, I'm not sure who it is that I need to hire next in order to accelerate my growth, then you can go to hirebreakthrough.com/quiz to take our free quiz. It's completely free. It takes like 3 minutes, but it'll help you figure out where you're hitting a brick wall when it comes to your recruitment and who it is that you need next on your team. And then the next thing is that for those of you who might have a recruitment process right now, maybe you're in the midst of hiring for somebody and you're like, we're having so much difficulty, or you have, a question or something, you can, of course, book your complimentary 15-minute hire breakthrough assessment with us. We'll give you feedback about either your organizational strategy or your recruitment process. So if you have one question that you need, answered, we'll give you our feedback in that complimentary call. So those are the two things that I wanted to share with you. And of course, we can go ahead and move to Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all of you. And you can go ahead and ask me any questions that you might have.
This was amazing. Hiring is fascinating to me. I just think it's, I didn't realize how many hours and days had to go into hiring. Like that kind of blew my mind. If anyone has any questions, feel free to hop off mute or drop it in the chat. We can dive into those. There was one question that came in through the RSVPs that I was kind of curious about. It was how to strategically hire for a more expensive position and how to find people in areas I don't have experience in, i.e. sales or interior design. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that's a really great question. What's going to really help you in order to hire for more strategic roles like that? So like you're thinking of like business development, sales, marketing, and those type of roles. Of course, you want to do it as early as possible, but it doesn't necessarily even need to be a full-time role. It can, of course, develop into a full-time position. So I think sometimes what we think as founders, like, okay, I need to just hire like the full-time person. You don't necessarily need to do that quite yet. You can actually allocate a budget for a couple of hours, because if this is somebody truly skilled in this work, you will get a return on investment. And as you're, of course, if it's helping you to bring in more money, you will have more money to hire this person full time. So of course you can do something where you can hire somebody as a contractor for a limited amount of time and you can convert them to full time. Or if you're really early stage, you could just hire a contractor to come in and work for a couple hours just to free your space up, because there's nothing worse than there's an issue and you need help in a specific area and you're just kind of sitting with the problem rather than getting the actual help that you need. So that's kind of a way to kind of reframe that and think on that. If you also do have budget, so maybe you have like the budget you need to hire somebody full-time, and it might not necessarily be up on par with the actual industry standard for the position, then what you're going to want to do is that you're definitely going to want to beef up on your benefits. What is it that you can offer this person? Because benefits, it's also technically included in a compensation package. So if it's something where this person is like, okay, maybe I want a job paying me like $80,000, and you're like, I don't have the $80,000 to really allocate to this position, but hey, I can definitely beef up on the benefits. So is this like you can offer some type of remote type of work? That's also a big benefit. People are looking for those type of capabilities. Is it that you have additional things that you can add in? Like maybe you can give health insurance. I know some people who've gotten really creative with their benefits. So I don't know if they still have this, but I remember a lot of people, ClassPass was a benefit and people love that. Like you have to think strategically what you can offer somebody to make them actually want to hit apply and say, yes, I want to work here. I've seen people take pay cuts for a lot of positions just because there was no work and life balance. You want to think about that. If you're like, I want to have work and life balance for my employees, well, people are thinking about that. So if you can actually beef up on some of those things, you can actually end up getting a really good person for a position, even if you don't necessarily have the industry standard in terms of budget and salary when it comes to that position.
Awesome. Thank you for addressing that. Sydney had a great piggyback off of this topic. How do I evaluate if they are skilled or not if I don't know anything about the skill set that they have?
Yeah, so one thing you could do, you can check references. So let's say, for example, if you're the founder and you're like, okay, I need help with business development because I just don't know what I'm doing. So if you're in that type of situation, you can get testimonials from people. Like you want to talk to some of the people that they've worked with. Another thing too is that you can ask them about questions about like almost like transformation, like the type of companies maybe they've worked with in the past and what the benefit was after they worked with them from X, Y, and Z type of time frame as well. Another thing you can also do is you can also think of the type of questions that you would need answered to make an informed decision. So for example, if, like I said, if it's a business development type of role, you want to ask them, okay, Like, let's say if your business is, I don't know, if you have a type of product business and you say to them like, okay, we've been really stagnant, maybe with our marketing campaign. If you were to start in this role in the next 30 days, what are some things you would implement in that campaign to help us kind of turn this around? Again, you want to ask questions to see if they know what the heck they're talking about, because this is a real fear. You definitely will have people apply to your jobs that have no experience, at all. And that's what they're trained to do. Like people who are in the field of like helping candidates to like, get higher level positions, they'll tell them like, if you don't have any experience, go ahead and apply, which is not a bad thing. But you as the founder, you want to definitely have people with experience, particularly if it's not an entry level role. This is a way that you can kind of get around that. And of course, think of assessments. Do you have anything that you can score them on as well? Too, it could be also that maybe you have somebody that can do the interviews with you. Maybe you have somebody who's worked in business development or knows the right questions to ask. They can help you with the interview too. You can ask them as well. And that's kind of how you can make a more informed decision, particularly if it's just something you just have no idea about. So I remember for me specifically, when I was trying to figure out social media, I was like, okay, this is just not my my thing, my zone of genius. We did a lot of research into what questions we need to ask. And of course, other founders who, that was their thing, we just asked them like, okay, what are some things we need to keep in mind when it comes to like social media? And it helped the process be more easier and much more seamless. And we were able to actually see and identify if the person we were going to hire actually had the skill set and the capabilities that we really needed for the position.
Thank you so much for diving into that.
Sure.
If anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to share them in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and share our office hours event feedback form. So if you have any feedback to share with us, we'd love to hear it. It's completely anonymous, and we always want to make sure that we are delivering the office hours that'll be most valuable to you. So please feel free to share your thoughts with us. This was so amazing. Kimone, thank you so much for pouring out your knowledge to us and walking us through this process. I feel like this was such a great packed session with so many actionable takeaways. So thank you so much.
Of course. And of course, if anyone has, of course, additional questions, go ahead and just book the complimentary call and we can, talk about it. Because I know some questions might come up after this session as well. So if you're wondering, just, go ahead and do it. It's completely free and no obligation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for offering that and for giving back in this way. We are so grateful for you. And thank you everyone for joining and asking questions and learning alongside with us today. It's always such a pleasure to do so. And we will see you all on the next office hours.